Hey everyone, thanks for joining our Google Hangout today on working abroad. This is part of a Google Hangout series that we've done kind of like over this last year and a half for our Global Ambassador group. It's a bit of like almost like a professional development series on different topics that would be interesting to our alum. And yeah, just sort of a way to like give back to the ambassadors for everything you guys do for us. And when I asked the question this semester, which topic you would most want to hear about out of a few different ones, working abroad after graduation won by a landslide. And I was excited because I knew some really good people to kind of pull in to do this panel and sort of share their advice today. Everyone on this call today, including myself, is both a TEAN alum and worked abroad after graduation, which is really cool. And we have sort of a nice I guess, range of representation in terms of where different people did work abroad or do work abroad in some cases. So I'm actually going to kick it off by just having each one of my panelists go through, introduce yourself, tell us where you currently work or sort of like where you're based at the moment, and then also tell us about sort of where you did work or have worked abroad and give us some of that background. So do you want to kick us off, Kate?
Sure, I'd love to. My name's Kate Hilby, and I am a program manager here at TEAN. As Hannah said, I'm also a TEAN alum and was also an ambassador when I was at the University of Iowa. I studied abroad in Melbourne at Deakin University, and then after graduation went back and worked in Melbourne for a year on a working holiday. I worked at Victoria University for 6 months and then switched it up due to visa regulations, and worked for a temp agency where I was placed with an environmental company just doing admin work.
Cool. Brynne, do you want to go next and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Brynne Shannon, currently living in South Carolina, working at a TV advertising agency in town. I just spent the past year teaching English in Thailand. I went through TEAN's Thailand program almost 3 years ago, actually. And I came back, loved it, was an ambassador on campus, and decided to go back and teach English.
Very cool. And Zoe, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'm Zoe Kazurinsky. I'm originally from Chicago, but I currently live and work abroad in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm a TEAN alum. I studied on the Gold Coast at Bond University, and I currently work managing a student exchange program at Victoria University of Wellington.
Cool. You guys start off by telling me a little bit about the timeline in terms of what research and preparation you kind of did to move abroad. Like, for example, how soon did you start thinking about that in terms of taking the steps to go? Was it more spontaneous, or was it, a bit, almost like premeditated? And maybe give some specific examples in what prep work you did before your move.
I'll start. So I started researching ways to go abroad again once I was back on my campus my senior year after my study abroad. I started originally looking at some different companies and providers that help you go abroad and get jobs. I knew I wanted to go to Australia, and so then started, Googling, got down the rabbit hole of Googling visas and all that kind of thing. Came across the work and holiday visa, so realized that I could really do that myself and didn't necessarily need to pay a company to do that. And so, yeah, then I just ended up kind of looking at some jobs, what jobs were available a bit closer to my departure. And then, of course, updated my CV and resume, so I was ready once I got over there to kind of send that out to any companies.
Nice. I was kind of similar as Kate, where I knew where I wanted to go and kind of what I wanted to do before I graduated. So I kind of started my senior year looking into different programs, like third-party programs that send people abroad. Just because of the language barrier and the cultural barrier with Thailand, I wasn't necessarily comfortable just flying over there, not having a plan, or doing things on my own. So I talked to some people who I knew had gone through CIEE, which is the program that I ended up going through, and got their opinions, looked into the program, and kind of just did what I had to do for the application process that was ultimately at the end of like May or something. So it was kind of like throughout my senior year I was sending stuff in and getting letters of recommendations and that sort of thing.
What about you, Zoe? What was your timeline like?
I kind of went in blindly. I had been working in Chicago for 2 years and decided I really missed being abroad after studying abroad. And so I knew that New Zealand had a working holiday scheme available for U.S. citizens, and I took a leap of faith and I went there without any job security or knowing anybody, but I made it work. And in fact, I reached out to a TEAN employee, Rachel, who's a resident director based out of Auckland, to see if there were any opportunities available. I just saw her on LinkedIn, and from there I started working as a resident advisor for TEAN while maintaining a temp job doing admin work as well.
Kate, you already kind of mentioned the working holiday visa, hinting at that, and that's the visa you went over to Australia. Can you just like kind of give a quick rundown on like what is this working holiday visa and like how can you use it or who can apply for it?
Yeah, so it's a visa that allows you to work for the same company for up to 6 months, and it's really supposed to supplement your traveling while you're traveling throughout the country. I really just stayed in Melbourne, so I wasn't necessarily like backpacking up the East Coast or anything like that. So I stayed in Melbourne. So like I mentioned before, I worked for Victoria University for 6 months, and then due to those visa regulations, kind of had to switch jobs. And
you can have it for a full year.
Yeah, so the visa's for a year.
Yeah.
So then you just have to switch jobs kind of one time for that 6 months. But yeah, I kind of got the job through a friend's mom at Victoria University, and then I really looked at applying at a recruiting firm or like a temp agency, because that kind of took a lot of the work out of finding a job because they just placed me. So in my experience, I found that to be super helpful. But yeah, there's other like cafes and bars that a lot of my friends worked at as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've probably seen the same as I've seen, that like you can kind of use it in different ways. Like some people almost use it to go, like maybe they go to Melbourne for a month.
Yeah.
Do some, a couple months, do some type of temp work there, and then maybe relocate. Maybe they do sections of working to save up to then do the next leg of the travel.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, there's different ways you can kind of use that. A lot of friends I know actually like ended up going on that visa on the working holiday, realized they loved X location, and then stretched it out a bit further, got sponsorship, switched to a different visa after that, which is a common experience as well. But
I just knew I wanted to be in Melbourne, so while I did travel the East Coast, of course, I just didn't need or want to necessarily be kind of moving cities every couple months.
Yeah. And Brynne, you kind of spoke about this as well, that you went through a program, and that was like sort of the route you wanted to go with CIE. And I guess talk about like the pros and cons from your viewpoint of like going through a program. Like, were there things you liked or disliked about, I guess, going that route?
Yeah, well, I wanted some structure. Oh, sorry, it's echoing right now. I wanted structure through my program, or through my experience, so I decided to go with that program. One of the biggest pros for me was that they have been partnered, CIE has been partnered with so many of these schools in Thailand for many, many, many years, so everyone generally kind of has an idea of what's going on in terms of like visa stuff, teaching certifications, immigration stuff. So I didn't really even have to handle that. They kind of just did it for me when I got there. So that was really helpful. Another pro was knowing that I had a placement and knowing that I had a place to live as well. They kind of set that up for you. I also liked that they had an orientation for us. It was like 5 days. We did some light teacher training, which was really helpful. And we also had the chance to meet other people that were in our situation and in our areas. So that was really nice to have, because I was in the middle of nowhere in my town. But I was like a 20-minute bike ride away from someone that I had met at orientation, so that was really helpful. And another thing was having that kind of point of contact in the United States in case anything went wrong. And if I couldn't talk to the department head at my school, if I couldn't talk to her about it, I could kind of email them and say, hey, this is what's going on. Not that I ever needed to, but just in case. And I guess in terms of cons, you don't have as much control if you go through a company like that, because when through the application process, you got to choose kind of what region you wanted to be in and what age group you wanted to teach. But I mean, there were so many people that were in my program that, they couldn't, meet everyone's needs like that. So I think I said that I wanted to be in a city, and I ended up being in the middle of nowhere. So, you kind of have to be flexible when it comes to that, because you could potentially get a bad placement. So that's what you're signing up for. And I guess cost, if you're not wanting to pay for the cost of that, then maybe it's not for you. But other than that, I had a good experience with it.
Zoe, a question for you. You've been in New Zealand for a couple years now, and I know you must get this question all the time, probably from family, friends, both there and here, because I know I always did when I was away. But do you see yourself living in New Zealand long term? Like, now that you've kind of like put in a few years, are you thinking, you're there for life, or is this a temporary thing? And I guess what are some of those challenges of, kind of building a life abroad?
Great question. The answer changes depending on who I'm talking to. No, I do see myself there long term. Over the past 2 years, I've worked really hard to go through immigration in all the right ways to be able to stay in the country, which has been a challenge in itself because it's not a guarantee, and it takes a lot of time and energy to devote to these applications. And in dealing with Immigration New Zealand, they are very helpful. I do see myself living there long term. I really love the work-life balance. It's just more conducive to the lifestyle that I want to lead. But it's definitely hard being a world away from your family and your friends, and living in New Zealand as well. As much as I like to think they're like ahead of the times in certain ways, they're also behind the times. So when I come back to the U.S., there's things that I really missed, like food delivery. You can get food delivered anywhere, everywhere. Businesses are open 24 hours, just tiny things that I used to take for granted. But ultimately for me, the balance is worth it for New Zealand. But it is hard. I have to say it's easier with Skype, WhatsApp, Google Hangouts, Google Chat to keep in touch with family and friends, but it's not the same thing as being there and missing events and things. But it evens out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's sort of like, this is maybe they've just come back, like junior, senior year, like just starting to think about this move as a possibility, not even sure maybe like where they want to go? What's sort of like that first step that you would say, like in terms of like, I want to go abroad, now what, basically?
I would say just see where you can go as a recent graduate out of the U.S. and what countries have schemes that support working holiday visas for U.S. citizens, and then that might help you narrow down your search of where you want to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would just make sure you do your research. So, and the more research you do, kind of the more you're going to know where you want to go, and just keep an open mind too.
Yeah, or in my case, I knew people who had worked abroad before, so I reached out to them after I had done a little bit of my Google searches. And I mean, I still get messages all the time from random people that, like a friend of whatever. And I always appreciate those people reaching out because, I know how hard it was and the uncertainty of what you want to do. And so I definitely recommend reaching out to people, even if you don't even really know them.
And what about, this is kind of a funny question, but what advice would you give to someone who really has their heart set on moving, but maybe mom and dad are not as supportive? Because I know this was certainly the case for me. I was telling these guys before that the best I ever got out of my dad was, I'm happy you're happy. But he never really said, I want you to move away to Australia. So I know that's a tough thing. It's, it's one thing when I think, you're saying I'm going to go study abroad because that has an end date stamped on it. But sometimes, going to take a job or potentially pursuing, this career abroad, has a bit more of a question mark at the end, potentially. It scares some parents. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a right answer, but do you guys have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, I just had to show them that I was serious about it. It wasn't like when I first said I want to go back to Thailand, they kind of raised their eyebrow like, okay, we know you had a really good experience, but what are you going to do when you go back over there? Like, are you just going to run around and spend money? Or so I had to show them that I was serious, and I showed them like the program that I wanted to go through. I showed them more information about Thailand, and I just, showed them why I was passionate and why I wanted to go over and teach English. And then they were like, oh, okay, go for it.
Yeah, I would just echo Brynne's comments. And if you've done your research, show them that you've done your research, and that just, shows them that you're serious as well. You can also frame it as getting international work experience, which is going to look good on your resume as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, my parents still hold out hope that I'll come back and settle here in Chicago. But with that said, they're very supportive. And again, they really do see it as well as I'm gaining great experience abroad, that when and if I do come home, that will help me stand out in a pool of applicants where people may not have had those experiences.
Yeah, for sure. And this might be a bit of a controversial comment, but we were talking about before, the group of us, that, it is, at the end of the day, like, hopefully your choice as well. Like, I know for me that was something, I've, like, mom and dad, I knew I couldn't get them on board 100%, but ultimately was something I really wanted to do and was going to do. So I did it, and I'm glad I did. So if that helps push you over the edge at all. What impact has working abroad had on your career, or maybe just like in your life in general, in terms of, there's all these studies that show, living and working abroad makes you a more creative thinker, and different things like that. And so I guess, are you guys more creative thinkers now?
I would say that it just pushed me out of my comfort zone. I'd never had a full-time job before, and then doing it internationally, I learned a lot of professional skills, and then work experience with people from different cultures and that sort of thing. So yeah, I would just say it also was the catalyst for my passion in international education, yep, which has now led me to my career at the Education Abroad Network. So
sweet. Well, with me, there was that huge cultural and language barrier that I had to get around every day. So, I mean, I think I was the 11th foreign person to come and teach, so they kind of had a good idea of like how to treat their foreigners, but still they would just kind of give me a list of like random standards and like a notebook that was completely outdated and say like, go make a lesson plan or something. So, and I had to work off of like very little resources, very little information, so it definitely taught me how to think on my feet a lot quicker and to be a problem solver, and definitely be like work more independently. So that was some of the main stuff.
Yeah, I think it's just really pushed me outside of my comfort zone, and it's been really cool to work in New Zealand and meet a bunch of international people, and it's also been the catalyst for my career in international education, and studying abroad was so impactful and meaningful to me that it's really cool to now be on the other end, even a world away, because I work with tons of people, a lot of people from the US and all over the world constantly. So I just love being a part of the community, and I think it really fosters that even a world away.
Yeah. So having kind of like been through it, you've lived it, been there, done that, what's sort of that one piece of advice that you wish you would have known that you could like sort of tell your younger self who's like maybe just graduated or about to graduate? Yeah, if you could go back in time, what would you tell the younger version of yourself, basically, which, is like sort of the shoes that all of our current ambassadors are standing in?
I guess for me, it was more because I knew I was going back. So early on my senior year, I knew I was going back, like heart set on it, time to start saving money, that I kind of pushed off my senior year in terms of like living in the now, I wasn't doing as much stuff with my college friends. I was working a ton of hours at a retail job, trying to save up. So looking back, I kind of wish I would have savored my senior year of it and really enjoyed that instead of just looking ahead. I mean, it's obviously good to plan and save your money and stuff if you know you're going to work internationally, but looking back, I kind of wish I would have enjoyed that last year of college a little bit more. I, of course, enjoyed it.
I agree with Kate. Since I knew I was going back, I knew that my friends were all going in separate directions after we graduated. I wish I had taken advantage of that a little bit more. But on the opposite end, I had, I think, 3 or 4 months between when I graduated and when I went back to just like work in the U.S. So I kind of wish that I had maybe, I know I didn't have the foresight to do this back then, but I wish I had thought maybe, okay, what am I going to do after that year? And what steps can I take now that will help me when I get back? But, you know, that's kind of hard to do.
As a recent grad, I actually felt a lot of pressure to go get a job and start my career fresh out of school, which I did, and I wish that I hadn't listened and I had just gone abroad then, even though it worked out 2 years later. So I don't think you should compare there's a right time, you know, if you have an inkling to go, just go. And if you don't like it, you can always come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard this a million times as well, but everyone was kind of saying to me, well, if you don't go now, you'll never go. And I'm like, really? I don't know if that's like good advice or bad advice, but to your point, Zoe, like, it's not, you know, the be-all, end-all. Of course, I encourage you to go, would be my advice, but, yeah, it's, you know, there's no correct way to do it, I guess.
Although for some working holiday visas, you can only go up until you're 30, so I know.
So maybe that's the right time to go.
But, yeah.
Before you're 30.
Keep that in mind.
We're about to wrap it up here, but I guess final words of wisdom. Any final tips that you just want to give the folks on the call today?
Just go for it, I guess, would be my word of wisdom. Yeah, it's going to be scary. There's going to be hard times, but it's worth it in the end. And yeah, just connect with any support networks you can, people you know that have done it before. Yeah, and just put yourself out there and keep an open mind and just do it.
Yeah. I'd say go with your gut when you're doing your research and whatever. Like I said, I talked to different people. Some people had really good experience with the program that I went through. Other people hated it. So just try to remember that everyone's experiences are different and unique to who they are as a person, and yours will be too. And I don't know, just don't overthink it too much. I mean, obviously prepare, but don't drive yourself crazy at night thinking, oh my God, what should I do?
Yeah, I would say just the ability to improvise or just go with the flow, because sometimes it doesn't all go according to your plan. So as long as you're mindful of that, and also, you know, a support network or reaching out to people who have previously done it, who are currently there now. Like, I seriously messaged people I'd never really talked to in real life, and I was overwhelmed with the response and their insight and the help and advice that they gave. So why not?
Nice. Did they leave?
I don't know. Do we get disconnected?
I don't know.
I don't know anything about.
Well, they were saying before, they were like, we've done this before, but there's always a technical difficulty, so I'm glad it happened at the end.
All right. Well, I might hang up.
Yeah, that might be better. So we're not just.
It's recording. Hi. All right. Bye.
There it's live.